Debriefing from the Unbridled Women Adventure Race. We have with us the team captain and navigator for the winning team Chick Points, Karen Clark. And what we're going to do is just have Karen sort of go through with us what their planning process was at the start of the race, some of the route choices they made, and just some little navigation pointers as we go through. If you all have any questions as we go, feel free to post them up in the chat or raise your hand, whatever, and we'll take that as we go. Feel free to interrupt us there. But so we'll start. Karen, do you want to start with the course instructions, the topo map? Let me know what you want me to throw up on the screen.
I don't actually have the course instructions because my teammate has those, but that was the first thing that we read through was those. So we knew what was coming up for each leg. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so we read through all of those to make sure there wasn't anything that was going to surprise us or anything like that. Let's see.
Yeah, and you pretty much you need to always start with the course instructions, right? This is basically your guidebook for getting through the course.
Yeah. And I think even before that, the distances, my teammates had looked at the distances and they were like, this is going to be great. We can do this. We can clear this course. I don't think they quite realized I'd be making them push their bike through the woods with no trails and stuff, and up and down some of the stuff we went down, but they felt like it was doable. So I kind of felt like before we started that we might be able to, when we read the distances and read through this, that we might be able to clear it.
Okay, and you're talking about the distances that I had put out for what you would need to cover to be able to clear the course.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So I don't remember much about the paddle. We figured we'd go for all the bonus points on that because it was early on. And that actually was the hardest part for me, was following the bear on the water. And then we did not think, my teammates have never done a race before, so I was the one kind of choosing the route. And we've actually been to that park before for a race, and we also came and rode the trails because my teammates wanted to do that. And we just rode the whole trails from the one down, I'm not sure what's that one called.
The Michael Tigert Loop is the one that went out to 6.
Yeah, the one going out to 6, we rode that and then rode all the way around the loops on the other side. So we did the whole thing. So I think for me, I was just thinking, okay, that's the way we're going to go. And 6 was the next logical number. So instead of thinking more about the bonus points were all there, we should wait and see what time we have left. We went for that first, which actually worked out well for us. But yeah, so that's
okay. So you're talking about, so they basically in the instructions, tackling the mountain biking leg, you had some options there. And I'll tell you, we'll get to that in a little bit and go through that mountain biking leg. So, but your plan from the outset was to try to clear the course.
Yeah.
And with that being the case, it was a little less important that you save those bonus points to the last. If you thought you weren't going to clear the course, it made sense to save those 6 ABC, to save 0.6 with the 3 bonus points associated with it for the end of that leg, because then you made sure that you got all of your prime points for that leg before you got to your bonus. And it made sense then, because 6 for the biking was kind of an outlier. It made sense for 6 to be your bonus point on the biking leg. And then of course, A, B, and C were all bonus points. So it made sense to save that to the end. And that's especially true if you thought you weren't going to clear the course. It worked out okay for you all. You intended to clear the course, and you did in fact clear the course. So that was fortunate. But yeah, my thinking was, if I approaching this race, I would have left 6 to the end of that for the reason that we've talked about. But okay, so in terms of like integrating information, was there anything that you looked at on the park trail map? Like, was there anything in particular that you took from that map that you put on your topo map or that you referenced from that map?
No, you know, I tried to put all the checkpoints onto my trail map from the other map just to get an idea of where they were at and what trail they were on, because sometimes it can be confusing on with all the lines on the other one.
Yeah, so you just went through, and actually, let me pull this over so that I'm going to stop share for a second. Let me pull this over so my little annotation things are over here. So what you would have done then is just laid your topo map beside your trail map, and as best you could, like Blackberry Shelter was obvious, you were going to circle that. And then 7 was actually at that intersection. 9, good luck figuring out which intersection 9 is on this park trail map. It's very imprecise over here, but it's that one actually. And then 8 you figured was like over here somewhere. 10 was obviously down here somewhere, right?
That trail map was not, because yeah, it wasn't real accurate. It was not very accurate. That
Yeah.
one. But
yeah. Super inaccurate as far as the trails and trail intersections. One nice thing is that it does give you the color of the trails, and those matched the blazes on the trees. And then also the mile markers were out there on the course. And so that was a good point of reference I know that some teams used. So anything else that you took off of this trail map?
Not really. A little bit of the distance, like we looked at the distances on there because they were written on there. I used that, but I have the little wheelie thing too, and I did some of that on our map.
Yeah, I can see that this trail map would have been useful as well. Number one, just to give you sort of a broad overview, and it gets rid of some of the clutter of the topo map, right? By not having those contour lines on there, you can focus on sort of the big, items that are here that are going to be big landmarks, like the lodge, the boat dock, things like that, the campground, right? Like, it's not obvious on the topo map at all that this is a great big campground down here. So there are definitely features like that you could pull out that could be helpful. When you were going up to 1 and 2, I could see the trail map being helpful to just sort of figure out some of what was going on around the lodge. I felt like that provided some good information for that leg, just to make your way up through this, past the pool, the lodge, and to get onto that trail system. Okay, so let's pull up the topo map then. Let me stop the share so it gets rid of all those things. Okay. All right. So 1 and 2, I'm sure everyone did mostly the same thing. You're just running the trail out and then down to the put in. So the paddle points, the bearings and distance, did you bother to plot those on the map at all? Or did you just use your compass from the field?
I just used my compass. So the first one, let's see. So we went to 3 first, and then we had to come back. And so I wasn't quite, I kind of rushed 3, and I wasn't sure if we were coming onto that. I didn't cross over initially. I went to the re-entrant that's across from the actual one that we're supposed to go to. So I wasn't sure, like, I didn't take a lot of time to figure it out. And then when we got there, I was like, okay, it's not this one, it must be across. So the next 2 points, I was a little more careful at kind of figuring and looking at the distance and actually measuring the distance. I didn't do anything on my map, but I did measure it more carefully. So we didn't have as much trouble with those ones.
Yeah, okay. Because obviously you couldn't just hold your compass up and take a bearing in the field from
Yeah.
4 to 4B. You had this huge ridge in between.
Yes.
Yeah, so you would have at least like laid your compass on your map and gotten a general idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was pretty easy. And then 5 was pretty easy to, 5 was just trying to find the place to pull up in that little reentrant there to get up to it. Was the hardest part, getting out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what we did there.
Yeah, so Deb was just asking, and that's what I would have done too, because you can see you've got this huge steep hill right here. All those contour lines together tell you that that's super steep. So you would have been able to look from the cove over and seen this big hilltop and know that's where you needed to be. But in terms of getting there, this little cove is super flat and has a trail right there. And so that was going to be really an ideal spot to pull out. And then I probably would have just gone straight up the side of that to the hilltop. I know some other people opted to take the trail around. I don't know that that really does you any good.
It wasn't too bad there. We actually didn't even park at the trail. We parked on the, what would that be, the northeast side. We pulled our boat up out the water there. It was a little steep, and then just walked straight up the spur there to the point.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so then you bring your boats back, you're taken out here. And so at that point, you've told us that you went to 6 first.
Yep.
Okay. So let's get our highlighter here. All right. So you've gone around, you pick up the Michael Tigert Trail then?
Yep.
All right, you drop your bikes here, you plot your 3 bonus points, and then how do you attack those?
So then we kept going up, walking up the trail until we got to the top of the ridge there on that hilltop, and that was pretty obvious. One, because then, so we kind of paid attention because you're going, what's that, north? You're going kind of northwest, but then it turns pretty north. And so we kind of watched for the turns in the trail. It went north, and then you kind of reach a little hilltop there where the trail starts to turn and go east. And that's kind of what we watched for. And then I kind of took a little bearing just to get us going in the right direction, but we did kind of skirt around the reentrant there. So we counted that. And then we looked for the next one and we're looking for we looked for the direction that the reentrant was facing there. And that one was pretty, I think we pretty much walked right into that one. That one wasn't too difficult.
So you just stayed on the ridge top?
Yep.
Like that? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so you could use the head of this reentrant as a pretty noticeable feature when your trail's kind of curving around that. And then as you head out, then the head of this reentrant is a next good point. You're going to see that coming up. That's a big reentrant coming up. And then you're following the ridge top, and you're just kind of going due east into this big reentrant system that's facing northeast. And you had a reentrant coming down this way and a reentrant coming down this way. And so the point was right there where that and that come together, right? Okay. And so then how did you leave out of there?
So then I kind of took another bearing just to give a general direction to the next one. And then I kind of just tried to follow the features, like you walked in between the 2 reentrants, one on each side, and came up to a hilltop there. And kind of just watching for the reentrants and skirting around the edges of them, but kind of trying to stay on the bearing so we didn't go up off into that other spur to the north, northeast. No, that one. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that was a tricky spot right here. Yeah. That was, I mean, this is why I told people trying to navigate this ridge top was not easy. And that's why, but it sounds like you did exactly the right thing. You looked for this saddle right here. So this is a saddle, right? We've got a reentrant coming up from the south, a reentrant coming up from the north. You've got a high spot here, a high spot here. This is going down. You hit the saddle, you climb back up. And so what's tricky about that is when you leave off a ridge top going down a spur, you need to really make sure you're able to number one, use your compass to make sure you're going in the right direction. And then two, if you're trying to hit a saddle, make sure that you're visualizing a hill coming up on the opposite side of that so that you're not inadvertently, going down, 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 and keep going down, right? You need to know that you're going up again at some point after 1 to 2.5 contour lines or so. You should be heading back uphill. So you really need to pay attention as you're navigating these ridge tops to know if you've got a lot of descent like you do right here through this saddle, how long before you should find yourself climbing back up, and then be looking for that rise on the opposite side. So you climbed up to this hilltop, you bent north a little bit, but then you had to make sure that you bent back down to the southeast. You didn't want to shoot off this spur, is what she's saying.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So you're watching your compass really carefully while you skirt around this reentrant.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we got to that little hill at the end there, and I can't remember that one, if we had to go down a little ways to it. I think we did. I think we had to start going downhill to that one, and there was a steep little section there, and we pretty much walked straight into that. I mean, we pretty much walked straight into all of those ones, which doesn't always happen. But I felt like you couldn't go too far one way or the other before you were going steep in the wrong direction.
Yeah, as long as you were keeping an eye on your compass.
Yeah.
Right here. Yeah, so after you bent around that reentrant, the key was don't keep bending around, right? Because if you do, you're going to end up going south down this spur. Again, it's watching your compass to make sure you're going to see this little rise right here. And then when you see that little rise, you need to be watching your compass so that you're going due east coming out of that rise. And you should see it flattening out, right? This is going to look like a long flat finger right here. And then you've got a slight rise before you hit this big broad hilltop. And when you hit that hilltop right there, it really, you can see it really spreads out and is broad and pretty, vague. So it's important right there to keep an eye on your compass again. It was easy on this hilltop to inadvertently end up going north if you weren't careful, because these spurs weren't super well defined from the hilltop. You had to kind of get down off the edge of that hilltop before you could really see the point of this spur. So again, it was important right here to use your compass and make sure you were going, that's a little south of east, not north of east, to make sure that you're coming off that. And once you started down, it was more distinct, the nose of that spur, and a really pretty rocky prominence right there, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, because after we got that, we kept going down the spur to get to we ended up right at the gate with the campground, where the campground and that kind of gravelly road meet.
So you continued due east instead of heading north?
Yeah, well, we just looked for the easiest way down, and that looked like the easiest way down.
Yeah, okay. Yep. All right, and so then
we went back up that gravel road towards 6C. And this was kind of tricky because you couldn't really see the reentrance real well from that road. So kind of went a little bit by distance. And actually we stopped before that because we went up that reentrant right before 6. We cut in up that reentrant and yeah, right there. We came up there and kind of came in between those two hilltops. How there's a little hill there and another one. We came up there and then went up and got it. But I think that was probably the hardest one to figure out if we were in the right place.
Yeah.
There. I think I started pace counting, which actually that's a long pace count, but I did a pace count and I looked at the distance and said this should take us maybe it was 15 minutes or something I gave us to get there. And those two things were about right. And then I think I looked for the re-entrance on the other side too, to make sure there was one going off that way in the right direction too. And so we bushwhacked across there. You had to go across a little creek and through a field to get up there. But that, I think that was probably the hardest, or that was the one I was like, okay, I'm not 100% sure of that one, because we're either on that spur or we're on this other one next to it. We came up too soon. Yeah. But I felt like this one direction wise was when we were coming up, I felt like we were in the right one because of the direction it was going. But that was the one I wasn't 100% sure on. And that was the one I was like, okay, I might not have gone this one. But
yeah, I know that Annie's team had trouble on this one and she's raised her hand. Go ahead, Annie.
Yeah, you said you were pace counting. Did you pace count all the way from the gate to where you went in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a long way, and I don't normally pace count that far, but I did pace count in time. And my bad thing was my teammates, we hadn't really gotten trained up to pace count, because normally I'd have somebody else do that. But yeah, I pace counted and we went by time, because I think we figured out it was just over 1 kilometer, and I think we gave us maybe 50. I don't think it was 15 minutes. I think it was like 12 to 14 minutes, I think is what we decided we were going to pace. And so I went with both of those things and trying to watch for the topography, which was hard there because the trees kind of obscured it along the creek. So I was paying a lot of attention to a lot of different things there. But that was the hardest one. That I felt like that was the hardest one for me to get to.
Okay, that's, yeah, interesting. So the way I tackle that, and I set these controls, by the way, doing exactly what you've done. Coming out of 6A, I did go just due north to hit the road. But then how I tackled 6C was I went out the road, I noted where this western bend was. And, you know, I want to point out that so often we tell people rely more on the terrain rather than man-made features. And so when I say I looked for that turn right there, it's not because my map showed me a gravel road. I didn't really care about the turn in the gravel road. What I cared about was the turn in the reentrant, right? The gravel road is following this reentrant. So even though that gravel road could come and go, it could be overgrown, it could be inaccurate on the map, whatever. What's not going to change is the fact that this creek goes northwest and then it bends hard west right here, right? So I'm in this creek valley, which is a big, wide, prominent creek valley. It bends hard west. So I was watching my compass. I knew when I had made that hard west bend, and then I stayed along the road past the reentrant that Karen went up, because I knew when I made this hard west bend, I looked at that reentrant, which had a big grassy field and a power pole, right? So I saw that. So then I knew I needed to go past this spur that was on the other side of that. And this spur came right up to the road the way it shows right there. And then my next, what was my attack point was right here. So I looked for where the gravel road turned southwest and we had this big reentrant. So the gravel road then starts to climb. Basically right here is where the gravel road leaves the creek and starts to climb up and out that reentrant. And so after my west bend, I knew I needed to go about 600 more meters past a big reentrant on the right. And then I looked for that creek turning north, basically a great big Y in my valley, right? Where the creek turns north, the gravel road turns southwest and starts to climb. And so that was my attack point. I went to right there and then I climbed up that way.
That was pretty steep because we came down there.
Yeah, it was steep. It was definitely a steep climb. I ended up kind of coming a little more to the right of the hill just because of the steep, and there was that cliff band. So I had to skirt a little to the right to skirt around that cliff band. Yeah, it was super steep, but it was really pretty.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't mind it. And then I just turned right around and came back down. So yeah, just two different ways to attack that one. And yours, you know, is actually a little less distance, right? You covered less distance than I did because yours is a more direct, right? I kind of overshot it and went up. So
And I think
that's
we
not
did
to say my way was better.
I think I did look for the turn in the road too, direction wise, because I did that a lot at this course. I might have looked at that too, like when it turned. I think I was probably, I just remember telling them not to talk to me for this one because I was trying to think of too many things. And I think that might have been the other thing we're looking at was the band.
Yeah, yeah. When your navigator goes quiet and becomes non-responsive, it means she's got her head in the map and she's trying to think, right?
Which a lot of times if you're with people, like I should have been smart and had them pay, like have them do one of the other things, like pace count or something. And we just didn't get that far training wise to figure out the pace count. So.
Yeah. All right. And so then you skirted down that steep side, you picked up the gravel road.
Yep. And then just came back up to the trail and back to 6 the way, yep.
There we go. All right. So any other questions right here?
Yeah, Karen, you mentioned that you expected between like 12 and 15 minutes from that gate to the CP. I know you mountain biked with your teammates, but did you guys specifically do trekking training together, or do you just know about how fast you go on foot? Because that was one of the things I'm trying to work on is having better speed estimates and time.
We did some hiking together. Mostly we've mountain biked, but we did do some hiking together, so we had a little idea. But then also, I'm trying to think. There was somewhere in there. I think hiking. I took out when we were hiking at one point. I can't remember if it was going from. It might have been going for the first two, like to 1 and 2. I kind of took an estimate of how fast we were going there because that was about a kilometer or just or thereabouts. And so I kind of, at one point, I just remember timing us to see how long it took and used that when we were going to 6C. But we had done some hiking before. And then kind of with my other teammates, I kind of know we can do about 10, 11 minutes a kilometer isn't kind of what we do maybe. So it was kind of just, that was very rough. Like that was just a very rough thing, and using more than one thing was definitely key there to figure it out.
Yeah, good. Talking about having measured your time going to number 1 or number 2, you know, that sort of comparative pacing or comparative distance measurement can be a really valuable tool, especially if you're in an area where the terrain is very different from the terrain where you usually train. So if you usually train in a really flat area, you may have your pace count really dead on, you know, for a flat road run, you know, down here in this valley, but then you may have no idea how many paces it takes you to climb a hill or to do a ridge top like this. And so what you can do in those situations is look at 2 known points on your course that are a known distance. Like from 6, what they could have done was looked at their time as they left the Blackberry shelter and then figured their time before they got to this place where they're going to leave the trail, figured that's about a kilometer. Okay, so what was our time? What was our pace count to get from there to there? That's going to be roughly the same as it's going to take us to go out this, you know, ridge top here. So you can use that sort of comparative analysis on a course like this. If you've got 2 known points, you can use that as a given distance and then, you know, make notes about that and use that later in the course, even in completely other parts of the course, just to give yourself an idea of about how long it takes you to cover the same distance or half that distance or twice that distance, whatever it is.
Stephanie,
yeah,
is there any way that we can get so our group didn't make it to 6 or the bonus points. Is there any way that we can get the UTM coordinates so that I can just practice to see if I would have at least gotten the right spots?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send
Okay.
those out, and here are those 3 points, obviously, that I've
Yeah, I
put
took
on
a
here.
picture of it just in case, but that way, like, I just want to like, because I have my map, I'd love to be able to just see if I would have even figured that part out or just been wandering around Kentucky.
Yeah, out here on Clay Lick Ridge Road somewhere. Yeah, I'll send those UTM coordinates out there, and everybody can use those as some practice for sure.
That would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, anything else about the trek here? Nope. All right, Karen, you want to move on to the rest of the bike leg? Yeah, hang on, let me.
Stephanie, hold on. I got one more question on this section, just because it was a gamble we took later. I feel like I remembered you saying that the trail that went from the shelter back down to the road, that trail was slower going than you thought it would be. Is that right?
Yeah, that the warning I gave you all was that this trail right here, this Michael Tigert Loop trail, I think moves faster. You bike faster on this ridgetop trail than you do on this one. This one has a lot more little up and down than you really notice looking at the map. Like, see this change, this change right here, here, here. Like, there are a lot of ups and downs on this trail, a lot more than you get on this one, which tends to be, you know, it stays higher, flatter on the top. So that was my sense of it anyway, is I always have found that this trail goes a lot slower than you think it will.
Got it. Because we got to the end and we were so crunched for time, and we did the 6A, B, and C last. And so we got back to the shelter, and the whole way from when we tried to get 6C to 6, I was like, let's just take the trail down. And I was like, no, let's go back to the gravel road so we can just bomb the gravel road back to the campground. And I went back and forth between those two. And finally we ended up doing the gravel road, and I just needed validation. So thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty slow going. You know, whether it's enough to make up the distance of that, you know, that's a toss up. I don't know. I haven't actually timed them, because you do have the extra distance, and then you got to do this climb on the road. But you also can tow a lot more easily on, you know, that gravel's a nice gravel road. It's super smooth, you know, and it goes fast. And if you can tow on that, you know, you're covering that really quick. So, you know, it may well have been, if nothing else, the nice thing about this is you've got that beautiful fast downhill. This is flat and fast. And then you've really only got this one really hard climb that you've got to like mentally get through. And you can have someone towing you on that paved climb. Whereas this just feels like work the whole time. So, yeah.
I think we made the right call. We flew down that gravel path. So I was like, go.
Yeah, cool, good. Well, and I was glad that that we were able to set a course with some, you know, good route choice and different things. And David Fry was a big part of that whole, a big part of that. So, yeah, I give credit to him for that. All right. So are we ready to talk about the rest of your bike route, Karen?
Sure. So then we just followed that trail that we just walked. And it goes all the way out to the road here. Yep, and then we took northeast on that road and followed it to where the trail comes back in. And then we stayed on, we got to 7, which was pretty easy. It was right in the trail. And then we stayed on the trail to the right. We stayed right at that thing and followed that around until that hilltop right above 8. So we got to that hilltop there, and then we bushwhacked. We dropped our bikes, bushwhacked out to 10, just took a bearing, bushwhacked out and back to 10. Yep.
On foot.
On foot. Yep. So.
Yeah, and I know I heard some people saying it wasn't clear to them that you were allowed to leave your bikes while you're on the bike leg. So yeah, let's make that super clear. I put in the instructions that you could drop your bike, that you could hike a bike. And this is why I intended for people to be able to have these kinds of options. That's not to say that this was the best way to do this necessarily. There were a lot of different ways to tackle this bike leg and these 4 points at the top in particular. And that was intentional. That's part of AR, is making those decisions and deciding, you know, do you want to spend more time on your bike? Do you think you're going to be quicker on foot? And so you want to do that. Like, that's part of it, is being able to make those decisions. So I regret that some people that I didn't communicate that well, but that's what we mean. And it's typically the case in adventure racing that unless the race director tells you specifically, no hike a bike, or you must have your bikes within, 30 meters of you when you hit a control, a race director usually is going to be very specific with you if they do not want you to leave your bike or leave your boat and go on foot to a point. If they don't specifically tell you you cannot do that, then it's generally understood that you can leave your bike or leave your boat and go on foot to a point. And it's just this idea of sort of a lesser means of travel, that being on foot is slower than using your bike. And so we don't care. If you want to go on foot instead of taking your bike, then, you can do that unless I tell you specifically you can't. And so that's when I tell you specifically you can drop your bike and you can hike a bike. And so what we mean by hike a bike generally is going off trail with your bike. And I think some people thought that hike a bike meant pushing your bike on the trail. They're like, well, yeah, we did hike a bike right here. Everyone hiked their bike up that hill or down that hill. But generally with hike a bike, what we mean is going off trail, or bike whacking is the other phrase that we use. Bike whacking is when you go between trails with your bike. And we'll show that in a minute, because I know Karen's team did that too. So those are all different ways of saying that you can bushwhack with your bike. And again, it certainly won't ever hurt you to ask the race director if you're unsure when you're planning your route, whether you can do that or not. But as a general rule, if we don't want you to do that, we'll tell you so. Okay. So you went on foot down to 10 and back up. You picked up your bikes, got over to 8, and then what?
8 was pretty easy. It was on the trail, but then we bushwhacked over to the other trail to the northeast. And then we stayed on that because we got on that one because this other trail goes in and out. And that one was shorter to number 9. And that just went right into the intersection. So that was pretty easy. And then.
Did you take your bikes down that steep hill?
Yes, we did.
Good for you.
And then we came back on the other trail. We just came back on that inner trail and came back down that spur to the P, that big steep hill. And then back to the start. And so we had time stuff too. I wanted at least an hour at the end there. And I think we made that. I think we made it back. It was just under an hour maybe to get the last 3 points. So we did have a couple of time things that we looked at.
Yeah, talk about those. Talk about how you broke the race up in terms of the amount of time you gave yourself for each leg to make sure you were moving through and we're going to be able to clear the course. I think after you told us how the distances for the bonus ones, I think I gave us 5 hours to get through all the 6 points. I wanted to do that. And I think we did. We made that. So then we had 2 hours to do the bike checkpoints and get back to the beginning, which we made that. And
And then we had an hour we just had under an hour at the end for the last 3.
Okay, so you had given yourself 5 hours to do the paddle, well, to do the trek, the paddle, out to 6, and get
all
those
the
through
6.
trek. Okay.
Yeah.
And then 2 hours to go do the rest of this bike leg.
Yeah.
And then that gave you 1 hour for 11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we did 11 first because that was the easiest one. Then we went to 12, and that one was basically, we just counted the re-entrants and looked for that little re-entrant there in the middle of those 2. And we actually went up the re-entrant and veered in from the re-entrant there.
Okay.
And then then we just basically came down there and went up the re-entrant on the other side, directly across. And at that point, we did another time thing. I was like, we've got, I can't remember what it was. I said, we've got 10 minutes to get to that one. If in 10 minutes we don't have it, we have to turn around and come back so that we could get back in time. Because I think it was, I'm not real exact on the times, but we'd measured our time from the intersect from 11 basically into where 12 was. We timed how long that took. And so we knew how much time it was going to take us to get back. Actually, we timed us from the start to 11 and then to 12. We timed what that would take, and it gave us just a little bit less time to get back. That's what we did. So we knew how much time we had to give ourselves to get back in time. And so that gave us 10 minutes, I think, to get up to 13. And then 10 minutes to get back down, and then whatever time, which that was a way over estimate because we finished with 14 minutes, I think, still to spare. So
Better with a little time to spare than.
yeah. But we just
overtime.
followed the side of the re-entrant up to 13. We kind of stayed on the, what would that be, the north? We stayed on the west side, I guess. We came up the west side of that re-entrant and just followed it up to the hilltop.
Okay. And then back.
And then straight back. And we went straight back down the way we came. I talked to someone else, and I think they came down this other hill, this other ridge there. Yeah.
So then they had to bust through all the bamboo.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So any questions about that? Any questions for Karen? I think I've got a couple more. But I'll open the floor up.
That was actually really helpful, Karen, seeing like some of the, especially the cut through from 8 to the other trail. I didn't even think of head from 8 down to 10.
Yeah, were you the ones that said, "Are you okay?" Somebody said, "Are you?"
We saw that. I was like, "What are they doing?" Like that's like, yeah, and it didn't even dawn on me to do that. Although I'm not sure, those hills were pretty brutal, so I'm not sure that I would have wanted to climb up and down those. But the going from 8 to the other trail, like, because those little loops that, like the little legs down there, were brutal.
Yeah,
I mean, we were so tired at that point, and there was also a lot of mud,
Yeah.
which ISIS found like every bit of it, and that would have saved us a lot of time.
Yeah,
This is super helpful.
yeah.
So iPhone has raised her hand. Is that Demita?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I've been sitting here this week thinking, when we dropped our bikes to go to 10, did you take a coordinate point to
I took
force
a
us on
bearing.
our bike to come back?
Yeah, I took a bearing to get there, so I stayed kind of on a bearing, and then I just reversed it to come back.
Okay, because I forgot to ask you about that, and I kept thinking that all week. I'm like, how in the world did we find our bikes?
How do you know what? Yeah, don't forget where you left your bikes. Well, Karen would have made a note. She would have known exactly where you were when you dropped your bikes and came off the trail. She knew you were right by this hill.
Yeah.
So then she just navigated back to that spot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thinking about that all week. I'm like, gosh, I would have never remembered where our bikes were.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure you make a mental note or a note on your map about where you dropped your bike so you can make your way back. Interesting. So for what it's worth, the way I would have tackled this, and I've already mentioned that I would have saved 6 for last. And so going at it the other way, what I would have done would have been, and this is pretty close to what David Fry, who was one of our course fetters, told me that he would have done as well. I would have pushed up that hill. Well, and in fact, this is how I set it. So this is how I set these points, 9, 8, 10, and 7. So I obviously thought this was efficient. I went to this intersection. I dropped my bike there. I ran down to 9 and then ran back up because I didn't want to have to push my bike back up that hill. I knew I wouldn't be riding it. And then I rode out this. And when I got to the head of that reentrant right there, I dropped my bike. I ran down to 8, set 8, ran back up to my bike. And then I stayed on this around to this point, and I dropped my bike there and I went down the spur to 10 and came back up. And then I rode this to there and cut across to cut that finger off. And then stayed on that. I went ahead and rode this around to the intersection at 7. And then I came back the trail here and came down that trail. And then I had already set 6. So I just came back. But if I had not already set 6, then I would have ridden the gravel road up and around to 6. And then I tackled that almost exactly like Karen did. And then, yeah, I would have faced the same choice Annie did. Do I ride this trail or go back and do that beautiful road? And like I said, that's a toss up. That would have sort of depended on how I felt that day. And if I had a teammate like Sarah to tow me, we definitely would have done this because she would have towed me right up that hill and kept me moving.
She towed both of us.
Yeah, she's pretty powerful. You know, and a lot of it with teammates like that, this was something that I meant to say. If you've got a teammate who is, you know, a better rider, if you're the better rider on your team, I strongly suggest that you do your best to stay just ahead of the slower riders, your slower teammates behind you, because it does 2 things. Number one, they ride so much better if they can see the line that you're taking, and it keeps you mentally engaged. If your teammate's right in front of you, you're going to go so much harder, you're going to ride so much better, not only because you can see what they're doing and you can do the same thing, but just you feel mentally like you're not miles behind, right? I see sometimes some team members who are strong bikers take off and leave their teammates. And not only are they violating the proximity rule, but they're just about ensuring that their teammates are going to ride slower, because you just sort of mentally check out. When your teammate's so far ahead that you can't see them, you lose all motivation to go fast. You're like, whatever, I'll get there when I get there, you know? So that doesn't have to do with the course, but it's a little team dynamic note that I wanted to make.
I actually do have something. I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Sarah was stellar when it came to that, because going into this race, that was one of the biggest things I was most concerned about, is knowing, I know she's an incredible biker. Annie was stellar, and they sandwiched me actually. And it was awesome. They're like, we always stuck together. And that's all she kept saying is, we're a team, we're a team. And you know what? It made the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Annie was rooting from behind. I've got one in the front and one in behind. It was amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm so glad you had that experience. All right. Any other questions in terms of course choices, route decisions, navigation, anything like that? Anything that you all did that you want to run past us or talk about? Decisions that you made that, like Annie, you're sort of second guessing, or you're wondering if, whatever.
I was just gonna say I added so much distance on how we picked up 7 through 10, and it just amazes me. I pick a route and I'm like, I don't see any other way to do it. And then I look at how somebody else says it. I'm like, dang it, that didn't even occur to me. So I'll get there eventually.
Yeah, it takes time. It takes time in doing things like this. Someone showing you a different way, right? So that's what this is about. And it doesn't always work out. Sometimes you try to be really clever. I will tell you that one of the things Sarah and I did when we raced at Greenbow, when 361 put on a race here several years ago, doing this little trick. Let me find my thing again. I've lost it. There it is. Doing this little trick right here where you come over and cross over. That's actually a lot trickier than it looks. And here's why. Because when you come around that, you need to make sure you go far enough out that spur before you cut over. Because if you don't, what you can do, if you do that a little too early, and you think you're just going straight across and you're not really paying great attention, you just know you need to go straight across. Look, you go straight across, you turn left on the trail, and you end up doing that, right? Sarah and I did that. I did that. I was the navigator. I was responsible for that one time. So, things like that can happen. Every once in a while, you think you're being really clever and cutting off distance, and I could not figure out how in the world we were going east when we had turned left on this trail and should have been going west. So, you have to be careful if you want to be clever and try to cut off distance and be as efficient as possible, just make sure you don't do boneheaded mistakes like that. Make sure if you're taking shortcuts that it doesn't end up being the long way around the barn.
I think when you have teammates that can navigate pretty well too, I think that helps. Because I'm sure if I had been racing with someone else like Casey or Christy, they would have been like, oh, well, why don't we leave that 6 till the end and do that? Somebody else would have pointed that out to me, but because I kind of planned the route myself, and Demeter and Sharon were also, and they're just like, yeah, that sounds good. They were just like, yeah. So that could have backfired on us, and we could have missed getting some points that were prime points. It worked out for us well. And I actually do better if I don't have a lot of people around me when I'm navigating, because then I don't second guess myself. And so it was kind of nice. We were out there, and I didn't realize till we got out there, I was like, oh, we're the only team here. And then I was like, oh, that's because everybody else went and did all the other points first. And so I didn't even think about it until I got there. But then I was glad I did, because we navigated straight to everything, because one, I didn't second guess myself. I picked my thing and I went for it. Whereas if there'd been other people out there and somebody was off going down another re-entrant, I would have stopped like 3 or 4 times to check that I was going the right way because they were going a different way and stuff like that. So I think you can easily get misled by following other people. I learned early on not to do that, but I think even still, if there's people around, like that happened going to, was that going to 1? No, it was going to 2. I think we'd got 1. And then there is actually a little trail that goes down to the lake, and a whole bunch of people went down to that trail. And I was like, no, I don't think we go there. I think we stay up here. And I second guessed myself a couple of times because everybody else went that way. And we were right. And we stayed on that trail, and we got ahead of everybody that was in front of us. But I think that's a good example of like you're following everybody, and don't do that. I think that's something I learned early on, was try not to follow everybody. And that's hard not to do.
And
Yeah.
then another question I have on route choice, and I think I've asked you this before, Stephanie, so you'll probably give me the same answer, but like, do you feel like almost always you're picking the route choice that is the shortest? Not no matter what, but like, I find myself avoiding big climbs because of feeling like I'm so slow in those climbs that I would rather do a little bit further without having to do a climb. Because like, just for context, so our team for 7 through 10, we went all the way around the end of like that little peninsula to 9, like to stay on that flat trail around the edge, picked up 10, then got up in the ridge and did 7 and 8 before we came back down. So we ended up doing quite a bit of extra distance. And I think it's because in my brain, I didn't want to do that climb that everybody pushed their bikes up. But so do you guys feel like more often than not, you're picking whichever is the shortest route, regardless of what else is going? And I don't mean like, going up the cliff side of a hill versus the more gradual side, but like when looking at a larger, when you're looking at when you're looking at how to get to a handful of CPs, for example.
Go ahead, Karen.
I don't know. Mark Latanzi, we talked with him before we did, it was before C2C, which didn't really matter about elevation, but we were talking to him and he was saying to try and minimize elevation, like to minimize your up and down, up and down, up and down. So it's hard. I would rather go the shorter. If I have to push up a hill and across, and that's going to be shorter than going all the way around, then I'll do that. But that was one thing I thought was interesting. I think it was some orienteer. It was like, try to minimize the elevation, the up and down, up and down. So I don't know if that helps or not.
It does, even if the takeaway is just there is no one way that you need to do it. You need to consider both.
Yeah. I mean, for orienteering, the better orienteers in the world, they tend to go more straight line, regardless of elevation. It's got to be a much faster, like trail option, or vegetation is just much, much clearer. Like if you go on Attack Point, you can probably find, they were doing this for a while. It was actually worldof.com over December. It was every day in December, they were putting out a little map or with a leg. They would pull like one of the long legs from whatever international orienteering competition, and everyone would get on there and indicate what route they would have taken for that leg. And, it was always a leg with multiple route choices, right? That's the whole point to a long leg in orienteering, is to have multiple route choices. And it seemed like invariably the bulk of choices, and these are all orienteers, right? These are serious orienteers getting on there and drawing their route. It so often was much more point to point, much more along the direct route than I would take. I tend to try to avoid climb as well. But that's just because of my fitness level, right? And these people are super fit, so they don't care about the climbs, right? Their strategy for that is just get fitter so that you're as fast on the climbs as you are going around, and then go straight. That's their strategy. So it depends on what your strength is, right? And part of it also depends on your navigation ability. If you can navigate a straight line, from here to here, you wouldn't do that here. You'd just go around the ridge top. But, if your navigation will allow you to navigate the straight line, and your fitness level allows you to climb the stuff without losing a lot of speed, then that's going to be faster. But if you need, the handrail or the trail or whatever it is that's not straight, either because of the navigation component or because you're just so slow on the hills, and that's definitely me too, then go around. So it really is very much sort of where you are and where your team is in terms of fitness and navigation ability. That those are both equally important, I think, in making that route choice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Ben's rough formula, I think for him, he does like a 2 times the distance that, you know, and it depends on how much elevation is in between, right? But if he's looking at 2 routes and one of them has a lot of elevation, the straight line route has a lot of elevation, and there's a roundabout way that's flatter and on trail, he generally does a 2 to 1. If the trail is no more than 2 times the distance, the straight distance, then he'll tend to take the trail because he's a fast runner, right? He's super fast on trail. And so that's just sort of the rough formula that he uses. And that's going to, again, be different for every person. I'm not a super fast runner. And so that's the other thing is, you know, even though I prefer to avoid hills, if it's 2 times the distance to go around, I'm not fast enough running. I'm not that much faster on the flat than I am to climb. And so I'm going to tend to take the straighter route, right? Even though I prefer to avoid hills, I'm not so much slower on the hills as I am on the flats that it makes sense for me to double my distance, right? When I do that, when I do take the flatter route or the trail route instead of the climb, I tell myself, you went this way because you could run. You better run, right? And so that's the thing to keep in mind. If you decide to go the long way around because it's flat, you better be booking it on the flat, because otherwise you've just given yourself a lot longer to go and you're not going any faster. So I always sort of make that deal with myself. I'll let you go the long way around instead of climbing over the hill, but only if you go fast, because if you go slow, you might as well go over the hill.
Yeah, that makes grinding up a hill not seem as bad. I'd rather do that than go for a run.
See, exactly. All right. Any other questions, thoughts?
I have a random question about, so what made you like, I've never been in a race where they've specified just 3-person teams. And I don't know if you've answered this before, but like why, like, was there a reason why you didn't allow like, you know, 2-person or solo teams?
Yeah, so the reason I didn't allow soloists is because I wanted this to be a team event.
Mm-hmm.
As for why 3 instead of 2, you know, that's a little less well-defined. And in fact, I'm thinking about making it 2-woman teams for next year. So the reason primarily is because I want it to be a beginner-friendly race. I really wanted advanced, you know, veteran racers like Karen to go out and find new racers, beginner racers to bring in. And so, you know, by sort of forcing people to team up, it encourages that. And then if it was going to be a team of all beginners, at least they were going to be out there figuring it out together, right? And so I think that it just makes it a really good experience. It's geared as a beginner race. And so there's also the safety consideration. If we've got a lot of beginners, it's super comforting to know that there are 3 of you out there. If somebody gets in trouble, you know, you've got a person to stay with the racer while another one goes for help. So, you know, I definitely want it to be teams for this event because that's a very different experience than racing solo. And I enjoy racing solo. So I definitely I'm not one of these people who thinks adventure racing is only a team sport. There shouldn't be solo divisions. I race solo all the time and I enjoy it. But for this particular race, you know, I think that to me, there's something very special about racing with other women in a women-only event. And I wanted everybody to have that experience. The other thing is, if it's a 3-person race and you lose a teammate, you know, we were able to still let people go out as a 2-woman team and just be unranked. If they had dropped down as a solo, we wouldn't have been able to do. I mean, we could have done it if I had gotten kayaks over, but that's the other thing is, okay, so then why not have 2-person, 3-person, 4-person teams? Logistically, it is so much easier having one division. And given that I've got like a really busy day job, making it logistically easy means fewer mistakes. Like, it just really streamlines things in terms of, results and all of the registration process. It just makes a lot of things a lot easier. And that's not just about like my time, it's about me not making mistakes, right? And putting on a quality event.
It actually worked out probably better for me because I was going to initially sign up with my daughter. And there's no way she could have done that mountain biking. And all I could think was, thank God, because if it had been, it would have been just the two of us, but she was not comfortable signing up with a person she didn't know. And so actually, while I was on the course, I was like so grateful that she didn't come. And it allowed me the opportunity to meet some amazing women that, but I was just curious because I've never done a race that only had one division. But it was pretty cool. It worked out awesome. But that was my biggest fear out of all of this, was like racing with these two women that I had never met before. And whether or not they would be, their idea of fun is my different idea of fun than what I had. Thankfully, we're all on the same page.
Yeah. Well, and, I tried really hard when people reached out and wanted to be paired up to try to make sure that we were getting people with similar goals. Similar goals is the most important. After that, similar speed is second, but similar speed doesn't matter if you've got similar goals, right? Sarah Dahlman is much faster than me and Deb and Annie, but it doesn't matter if her goal is to go out and have fun racing with us, right? She's willing to go slower and willing to pull us if we've all got the common goal. So that was the idea of it. And it seemed like, thanks, Annie. It seemed like it worked out really well, just from the teams that I saw out there that I knew were new and just meeting each other. It really tickled me to see how well everybody got along and the finishes that they had. So that was exciting, which kind of leads me to think, maybe we should keep it 3 women, but I know it's also hard to try to find teammates. So I'm kind of thinking about for next year, I'm debating whether to make it 2 women. We're also I'm thinking about going to, I'd like to have it at Parklands of Floyd's Fork, which is outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And it's got some dedicated mountain biking trails, but it also has this huge paved bike trail that goes through it. And it's not just like this flat rail trail bike trail. It's a paved bike trail, like with some beautiful elevation change, really easy, smooth hills that you can ride up, and fast, swoopy downhills with these bridges. And it's really beautiful. So it would be, really good, beginner friendly. It's something your daughter could ride, without being scared. So I'm thinking about that for next year. There's some different issues. The biggest issue there is with reliable water flow, because it would be paddling on a creek, a small river, and you don't have any control over the water flow. So that's the thing we would have to figure out there. But just to give you an idea of what we're thinking about for next year. Anything else with this year's race? Anything else about the instructions or anything like that, feedback that you all have, questions that you have about sort of how things work? And I'm going to send out a survey, so you'll have an opportunity if you don't want to talk about it right now, or haven't had time to think about it. I'll send out a survey so you can provide some feedback, and we can make sure that we keep making this better from year to year.
Actually, I just would like to say, I thought you were incredibly thorough. You gave us tons of information beforehand. Yeah, it was really good. I loved your training courses ahead of time as well. So
Good.
yeah, a lot of positive, lots of positive.
And I
Thanks.
really like the navigation thing that you did, because that really helped with like even though I didn't get to use the UTM coordinates, I had a much better understanding of seeing it in action. And this was super helpful too, because honestly, when we looked at the map, we're like, what other way is there to go besides the way that we picked? And obviously there are, we couldn't figure out like, why are people coming from other directions? Obviously they should have taken the same route we did. And so actually seeing like now I'm like, oh gosh, we could have shaved so much off of what we did. So, having this debriefing is incredibly helpful.
Good. Super. All right. Well, we'll definitely keep having, clinics and tutorials. And, this was all about learning how to adventure race, basically. And we really hope that everybody takes some of the stuff they learned here into other races, and, keep pulling in other women. That's what this is about, is trying to help grow the sport. And so we're super glad that it's been effective for you all.
And I just want to add more like good feelings to the mix, because I left the weekend like so just like full from the community and my experience, and like you provided so many new opportunities for beginners and also more experienced. I would consider myself intermediate, and I've never raced with people that I don't already kind of like intimately know essentially before. So that was new for me. And I've never even been close to being in a spot where I could even think about clearing a course. So that was really fun to even go for it, even though we didn't make it. I've never been in a position to even think about getting all the CPs. So I'm so used to being like, okay, we're going to have to cut some CPs. Which one are we going to do? So like, it wasn't, just providing the opportunity to navigate for the first time, but really it seemed like everybody had the perfect opportunity to do what that next thing was for them. Whether it was Karen and being a master navigator that got to take people who had never adventure raced out before, and have 2 people on her team. It was so cool to see everybody wherever they were get an opportunity to try whatever the next thing is that they were trying to do. So thank you, Stephanie. I really
Cool. That's what this is all about. Thanks for saying so. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to stop our recording, and we'll post this up for anybody who wasn't able to join us tonight, and look for whatever's next on our page. Thanks a lot, Karen, for walking everybody through this.
And thank you, Stephanie. We
helpful.
love you, and for everything that you do for the sport and getting us all motivated and out there.
Love you all.
See ya.
Good night.
Bye.